Well, this is Thomas, and welcome to RevUp. This is session or volume, or excuse me, module 9. We're talking about the listing agreement. So what we want to do today is we want to go through a copy of an exclusive right to sell listing agreement, which I have in front of you. Excuse me. This is one from my client, my friend, so it's okay for me to use this. So what I'm going to do, and so for the purpose of this, so most of the agents that are on these rev ups are in the mentoring program. So they're in the stages of learning how to set up their real estate business, how to grow their real estate business. So the forms are really important. And for other agents, it's a refresher. So by the way, if you have something you want to share, or say an incident that you had happen related to anything on this listing agreement, let me know. We'll share it. I do want to get through by 10:30. We want to keep this an hour or under on this session. I think we can do it today. So let's just jump right in. What I'm going to do is point out areas that you may want to take note of. So if you have a pen and pad, take some notes here. If you want to screenshot these different sections just to go back and remember later, you can do that. I can send you a copy of this by email if you'll just throw your email in the chat box after the session. So, but I'd rather you create your own as we go. And if you want to go into Zip Forms and grab your copy or whatever while we're doing this, that's fine. You can fill it out with us. All right, so we're on page 1. Let me reduce my screen size. Can everybody see the listing agreement form only?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure. I got some other things up on my screen. All right, so why do we use this form? Why is it important? This is a time I'll let you guys, somebody unmute, tell me why this form in particularly is very important.
I think it's important because it protects, obviously, it protects both parties, but it protects me as a real estate agent to kind of setting expectations of my services and to a client.
Yep, that's good. I like to refer to this unofficially as the hiring agreement. I can't do work for my client until we have something on paper. So this is that agreement. So we call it the exclusive right because there is a non-exclusive. We won't talk about that today, but the exclusive right means me or this firm and this firm only is going to be helping the McKinneys sell their property. So, and just so you know, whenever you obtain a listing, I don't care if it's friend, family, whatever, that listing, once you sign the contract, that becomes part of our firm. It belongs to the firm. So what that means is, yes, you're doing business with them. It's your business, but it's specifically the listing belongs to the firm. So like if you go under contract, that listing stays with the firm until it closes. If there's a dispute, the BIC of the firm, which is me, I'm one of them, one of 3, we get involved and we have to kind of play referee or mediator. But just so you know, whenever, unless you just, nobody's on here that just has their own firm only, but I have my own firm, but it's nested under Realty One Group Revolution. But anytime I get a listing, it's going to belong to Realty One Group Revolution. So just so you know that. All right, first thing we want to do, top of page 1, is make sure we put the proper names, the full names, the full legal names of both parties, if they're or more than one, triple, whatever. So you want to at least have the first name, middle initial, and last name. Now, the question is, some people don't have middle names. That's okay. Whatever their legal name is, that's what you need to put on the listing agreement. because who's gonna see this? Well, our firm is, but when you obtain this information from the beginning, now you can copy and paste this into the contract or the attorney seller information sheet. Anyway, you have the same information being transferred over and over. Okay. All right. What we don't want to do is have bad information on any of our forms. And then we want to fill in our form name, Realty One Group Revolution. Make sure Revolution is on the end, because Realty One Group is the corporate or franchise entity. Realty One Group Revolution is your specific firm. So we have 3 offices in Charlotte, but that is our firm name. So you have to have the complete name in order for it to be valid. Okay. All right. And if you'll note, anywhere there's a blue box and a capitalized note, that means what? Guess what? Take note. So they're giving you like a little hinter, a little heads up. And the note says, if the property was most recently owned by a person who is now deceased, the tax listing or last recorded deed to the property may not accurately identify the parties who should be named as seller. So pertaining to names, if you're in that situation where someone has just died, you're listing their property, you may want to consult an attorney. In fact, I would tell you that's probably what you need to do. The next thing is if the owner of a property is a corporation, a limited liability company, trust, or other legal entity, the entity should be named as seller and duly authorized officer, manager, trustee, etc. So you want to put the company name if this is if the property is owned by the company. Does that make sense? Okay. The third little thing down here under the note box, and the reason I'm reading this is because you're going to come across one of these, at some point. It says a non-owner spouse should be named as seller because he or she will be required in most cases to sign the deed to release certain marital rights in the property. If a married owner has signed and recorded a prenuptial agreement, postnuptial agreement, or a free trader agreement, consult a North Carolina attorney to determine whether the non-owner spouse will be required to sign the deed. I had this last year. I did a listing for a couple who were getting divorced, and the attorney, her attorney forwarded me a free trader agreement. I showed it to our closing attorney because we had a hard time trying to get her available to sign the contract. And my attorney said, okay, basically you don't need her to sign at this point. We just need his signature. And so it was easy from that point on. But had I not shared that information with the attorney, we might have been stuck trying to get her to drive an hour to sign all the paperwork. Okay, so let's keep moving. Any questions? I don't see any in the chat box. Okay, so those are, circumstances which may come up. It's not that common, but common enough that you may run across it. All right. Here is a bolded, here's some bolded verbiage right before the term of agreement. So let's read. It says, seller represents that as of the effective date, the seller is not or will not be, if the property is currently listed, a party to a listing agreement with any other real estate firm regarding the property. Seller also represents that seller has received a copy of the working with real estate agent's disclosure and has reviewed it with the firm. So this is kind of like a warning telling you, all right, you need to have this conversation and you need to get the working with real estate agent's disclosure signed by these clients. And it's also kind of telling the client it's a CYA for you, cover your asset, that when they sign this, they will sign having stated that they read that, hey, they can't have this property under another firm. Or if they said they weren't working with another firm and we find out they are, then we have the signed statement saying they knew about it. So anyway, just take note. All right, number one are the terms of the agreement. The only thing I'm gonna note here is that make sure you have the right boxes checked and the right blanks filled. Okay, so if we look under 1 subset B, effective date, Okay, when is the effective date? It is going to be the top box. The effective date shall be the date that this agreement has been signed by both seller and firm. Unless the property is currently listed for sale exclusively with another real estate firm, seller represents that the current listing agreement expires on X date. Now, if that's the case, what they want, they got a note down here, the Code of Ethics, excuse me, and it's giving you a note that realtors shall not engage in any practice or take any action inconsistent with exclusive representation or exclusive brokerage relationship agreements that other realtors have with clients. This doesn't give you permission to go out and solicit listings from other firms. It just specifically says if this say this client had a relationship with another firm, but the other firm has said, all right, on X date, your listing agreement is going to be expired, or we will no longer hold your property or whatever, then they send that information to you and you would check that second box and then the date the agreement expires. Okay. Otherwise, you always check the top box. All right. The reason, and that's also important because when you sign this listing agreement, guess what? That property has to go in the MLS within 48 hours, right? So the dates, they're important. Okay, expiration date, 1 subset C. You want to put an expiration date in here. For me personally, I always go out 6 months and put that date. It just helps in this market. I mean 3 months is sufficient, but I just go 6 months unless my client says something about it. But notice what it says: expiration date, this agreement shall terminate at 11:59 p.m. on March 31st, 2022. That tells them that's when the relationship ends. Okay, the agency relationship or the listing agreement. All right, number 2, under property. Okay, just make sure that these blanks are filled out. These are important. You need a street address. You always need the city, the zip, and the county, because when the attorney, when you go to process this information, it all goes to the lender and the attorney. They're going to need this specific information. So don't leave these blank. And then down at the bottom, just know that you have to initial each page, and then the seller will initial each page. All right, going on to page 2 at the very top, we have the legal description. Okay, so agents always, when I was a newer agent, I was like, okay, what the heck do I fill out? How do I find this lot, block, and all that? Well, let me tell you specifically, unless otherwise noted, all you need for the legal description are the things that I have populated. So you always want to have the subdivision name if there's a subdivision. And I will just go ahead and tell you, throughout Charlotte, or the 13 counties that surround us or in our MLS, there are subdivisions that are named by the same name in different areas. So it just helps us know that we're talking about the right property. Also, and what's not listed here and should be is the PID number. The PID number you can find in the tax record. So that's something I probably had it. So I took out some of the information in here just as examples, but the PID number should be listed here. And then other description, guess what that is? Where do you find that? Somebody tell me.
That's the actual legal description on the tax records.
Yes. Now, sometimes it'll look like gibberish, numbers and letters. Sometimes it'll just say, it'll be the address. Sometimes it'll be a combination of both. If it's land, it'll be a lot number or whatever. But make sure that information's there. We're going to need that later. Also, you need the property and deed book. deed book page number, excuse me. That is also found on the tax record at the last sale. This is going to be helpful to the attorney. They're going to, of course, do their own search, but this information, we want to relay the proper information so that everything happens expediently. All right, so there's another note box. It says the following paragraphs 3 and 4 are part of the offer to purchase and contract form 2T. A form which is commonly used to put residential real estate under contract in North Carolina to minimize the potential for disputes with a buyer. It is highly recommended that the seller and the individual agent who signs this agreement discuss in detail and describe in writing in paragraphs 3 and 4 what items seller is willing to convey as part of any sale of the property, and what items the seller would like to exclude, and what items are located on the property the seller may not own. Okay, so this is important. The reason the boxes are here, the blue box and the red box, is because there have been so many legal disputes over what is personal property and what is a fixture, what belongs with the house, what goes with the owner. So I'm just going to give you my 2 cents is always write everything down. There is a place, and we'll get to it. If it's a fixture, educate the owner, the seller. And if it's something they want to take with them, they have to unscrew it and replace it, or unscrew it and cap it, or unscrew it and paint it, or whatever. Usually if it's in the pictures, and I've seen this happen, if it's a picture on the listing and there's a dispute in court, sometimes they will go back and say, well, you marketed this property with this certain chandelier, so it should convey to the buyer, because you didn't say you didn't say you're going to keep it, you didn't notate anything. So I always tell people, if it's something you don't want or something you want to take with you, take it down before we list it. Now, there are exceptions. There's some things you can't take down, but anyway, so that's where you disclose. We'll get there. Okay, so I'm not going to read out these specific items. That's what you can do. That's your homework. But it gives you a list. It's not comprehensive, but it's a pretty exhaustive list of what something buyer and sellers may not agree on, or something that may be maybe a fixture or not. So this will give you an idea. Under subset C, and this is new, is you want to make sure that when you're listing a property, that when it conveys, that your seller knows they need to unpair or delete any electronic devices. And that's a protection for both parties. You don't want to leave like a smart camera or something that's recording on when the new homeowners are there. It's this all privacy thing. So just be smart about it. See, there's your key. But any kind of electronic monitoring or cameras or anything like that, the seller needs to take it with them. Or if it goes with the property, such as a Ring doorbell, just make sure that any software that's attached to it goes with the buyer or is replaced. The seller, or replaced for the buyer. Or it says here, reset to factory default settings. Okay. All right. Let's move on. Give me a second. Okay. So there's another note box here. Let me read it real quick. It says any fixture or other item described in subparagraphs A and B that will not be a part of the sale should be identified in subparagraphs D or E as applicable. So here we go. D says items leased or not owned. And it gives you examples: fuel tanks, antennas, satellite dishes, receivers. So for example, if I've got a satellite dish, and there's still some out there, that's not owned by me, but it's owned by the company, I need to let that potential or prospective buyer know that that object sitting on the roof does not belong to the seller, it belongs to the vendor. So when they take possession of the house, then they're going to have to deal with the vendor, whether they pay them off or continue the service or have the vendor come and remove it. Okay. Subset E says other items that do not convey. Well, you can use your imagination here, but you know what? There are some things that might fall in here, but that it gives you in the where my cursor is, it says identify those items to be excluded under subparagraphs A and B. So if it's a leased or owned type of thing, it goes in D, anything else goes in E. All right, number 4, personal property. Love this one. How do we know what personal property is? Look, a lot of, and I guess you guys run across it, a lot of people believe that washers, dryers, stoves are all personal property because you can pull them out, unplug them. Not true here. The one thing in the kitchen that I tell people that is personal property is the refrigerator, and if there is a countertop microwave or something like that. But your stove should be attached because we should have that little clip, what do we call it, that holds the stove to the wall. It's a safety measure. Can anybody remember what that is? Andrea, I'm sure you've dealt with it because back in the day, an FHA inspector would hit those every time. They would pull the stove back, and if the stove pulled from the wall, they would ding you. And I can't think of the name of it right now, but it's a little metal clip that screws to the stove, that screws to the wall. It's an anti-tipping device. That's what it is. So anyway, playground sets, personal property. Now, I will tell you, be careful here in this list because lenders are going to look at this, and if there's too much personal property or there's certain things that are placed on here, they're not going to pass underwriting. So if this list gets exhaustive, I would tell you to run it by your lender or the buyer's lender. Now this is thinking from the buyer agent side, okay? But just a side note. All right, and again, that note is telling you any personal property that will be a part of the sale should be identified in this paragraph. Okay, so any questions so far? We're going to start hopping a little faster from here. Okay, home warranty. Simply, this is very simple. Either the seller agrees to a home warranty or not. And if they do, put the information in here, okay? Listing. All right, some agent's going to say, well, I'm getting them to sign this listing agreement, but we may change the list price. Look, here's what you do. You have the best talk that you can have with your client. You want to get the property listed, right? You want to get it listed at the right price. Just know that if a week or 2 weeks into it, if you know you need to reduce the list price, or the seller comes and says, hey, it's not moving, let's lower the price, then you can do an addendum. But you want to make sure you have an accurate list price, something that you've talked, you've done your research, and you know, hey, this is what we're going to sell the property for. Then also you want to check these boxes related to the type of loan product or whether it's a cash deal, what the seller can receive to sell this house. They can take cash, they can take conventional. Now notice I didn't check FHA, VA, or USDA. Does anyone want to take a guess why?
Is it a condominium?
No, it's a stick-built house.
Hmm. Is it an older stick-built house that may not pass FHA requirements?
You're getting close. So the house is not that old, but the sellers brought something to my attention early in the process where I knew, like, okay, they didn't want to fix it. They'd already moved to Florida, but the back door, the French door off the kitchen, the whole back door and the trim was rotted out. Okay. So I knew that any FHA or VA or didn't qualify for USDA, but any FHA VA inspector goes out there, they're going to see that and they're going to say, nope, it's going to have to be fixed. So knowing that the seller does not want to fix it before the sale, I listed it as cash and conventional. That makes sense. Okay. All right. So the firm's compensation, number 7, just make sure the full list price, the list price is going to cover your commission plus the buyer agent commission. Okay. So make sure that you put the total here. And if you read it, it will tell you. And I'm not going to read all of the little subsets here, but what I do want you to know to fill in is down at under fee earned subset 3, it says if the circumstances set out in 1 or 2 above have not occurred, and if within 90 days after the expiration date, seller either directly or indirectly sells, options, exchanges, conveys, or transfers, agrees to sell the property. So basically this 90-day thing is while I had the property listed and I brought a ready, willing, and able buyer, and this contract expired within 90 days, if they go back and sell to that person I brought to them, then I'm owed a commission. Does everybody understand that?
Can you repeat that again, please?
So let me just read this, finish reading this out. So if within 90 days after the expiration or the protection period, seller either directly or indirectly sells, options, exchanges, conveys, or transfers, or agrees to sell this property upon any terms whatsoever to any person with whom the seller firm or any cooperating real estate firm communicated regarding the property during the term of the agreement or any renewal, provided the names of such persons are delivered or postmarked to the seller within 15 days after the expiration date. However, sellers shall not be obligated to pay the fee if a valid listing agreement is entered into between seller and another real estate broker. Okay, so basically, let's just say I listed this house. I brought buyers that were willing to buy it. Seller didn't want to sell, whatever. Didn't work out. And I've got a 90-day grace period here. When this agreement expires and that seller contacts one of those buyers that I brought to them and sells them the house without using another agent, then I'm owed. I can go after a commission. However, if this agreement runs out and they sign a new agreement with another agent, and then a buyer that had come to see it during my agreement shows up on the second time, and they buy the house, I'm not owed a commission.
Tommy, this is Karen.
Yep.
I know we're looking at the North Carolina, and how do we keep track of our people that are seeing that property? How do we prove it? And is it the same in South?
No, the intent here is, and so most everybody has to go through showing time. So between showing time and look, the intent is we're not looking for our client to screw us. That's not the intent. The thing is, if this happens where we had an instance where somebody, we know they're using us to draw a buyer, and then they're going to try to terminate our contract and then go work with that buyer. That's not ethical, right? That's not right. So this is kind of a protection for us in that instance if that happens. But it's on the agent. I mean, you're going to have to keep, it's your business. You got to keep track. How do you know? Well, if you think something's up, something's not right, somebody's trying to collude with somebody outside of, this agreement, then that's your red flag. Otherwise, a lot of agents, when we move on, if somebody doesn't want to work with me, I just move on. But if I were to check up and see, oh, they sold that house to a buyer I brought to them during the agreement, and it's within that 90-day period after, then I can go and say, hey, you guys owe me a commission. All right, I don't want to spend any more time there. Let's move on. All right, the rest of this page you can go and read, but I just want to make sure that you know, like for our firm, we cooperate with buyer agents. So that middle box needs to be checked or X'd. Cooperate with buyer agents representing the buyer, and then show how much of the commission you're going to share with the buyer agent. Okay, that the buyer or the agent is going to bring, that may bring a buyer to your listing. All right, and then number 9, the firm's duties. You need to know these. What are our duties based on the Realtor Code of Ethics? I'm not going to read those. And then on page 5. So here's something I want you to take a look at. There's some bold letters and some boxes to read. But number 10, marketing. There is now a box on the listing agreement that says commencement of marketing. Now, I already told you that once you sign the listing agreement, you're active and you have 48 hours to get that listing into the MLS. However, if you're going to market on a date other than that, okay, that's what goes in this box. For example, if you're going to do a coming soon, or if they've told you we want to wait 3 days before you market the property, then that date goes here. Otherwise, you have 48 hours to get on the MLS. Does that make sense? Okay. So what that keeps you from doing, and what the MLS doesn't want you to do, is they don't want you to sign a listing agreement and sit on it until you or the sellers decide you want to list the house. That's not the purpose. So when you sign that listing agreement, they already know that they're ready to sell, they're ready to get their house on the market, and that's the purpose. So we can't hold somebody up for weeks and months at a time. All right, there's another blue box to read. I'll let you read that. Okay, public marketing. That's another, look, this is another box that we initial, and it says, firm shall submit pertinent information concerning the property to any listing service of which firm is a member or in which any of firm's agents participate. In accordance with the rules of such listing service, seller authorizes firm to, number 1, to furnish the listing service notice of all changes of information concerning the property authorized in writing by seller. Number 2, upon execution of a sales contract for the property, to notify the listing service of the pending sale and expiration date of any due diligence period, yada, yada. This just to make sure that we understand this, okay? Then we move on down. There's a list of boxes under the heading that says seller authorized firm as follows. Make sure you have your conversation. So if it's a coming soon, that first box, coming soon advertising, has to be checked. If not, leave it unchecked. If you're putting a sign in the yard, we need this checked. Look, this is CYA for you and our firm, okay? This is the seller or the client saying, hey, this is what I'm hiring you to do. If you're going to have an open house, have this box checked, get that permission. If I get all these boxes X'd so that I have the option to do an open house, and I tell them, look, if we have the opportunity to do an open house, I will do one. So give me that permission. And then the box that says advertising other than on the internet. If you want to put this on Facebook, any kind of social media, you need that box checked. And then again, the last box is internet advertising. I'm sorry, advertising other than on the internet is door-to-door, mailers. So I have all these boxes checked so I can use any means necessary to get the house sold. But also you want your clients to know that if you are advertising it on the internet, that we have to abide by certain rules. Okay. On down page 6, middle way up, one up near the top, there's a little box that says office exclusive. Let's look at that for a minute. If this is initialed, it says seller withholds consent for the listing to be publicly marketed, including social media, and disseminated to other participants of any listing service of which firm is a member or in which any of firm's agents participate. Seller understands and acknowledges that, number 1, the rules of any such listing service may require the listing be filed with the listing service or the listing service be notified of the listing, but that the listing will not be disseminated to the listing services participants, and the listing service may require a firm to provide a certification signed by seller that the listing shall not be disseminated by the listing service. This is for that person that does not want their house on the MLS. Okay. They feel that you and you alone can get their house sold. What that means, if you do office exclusive, you can share that within the office, that listing, and you can sell it, but it's not going to be on the MLS. So this is the only exception that I know of for a pocket listing. Okay. This is the legal way to do a pocket listing, but it's not a pocket listing. It's called an office exclusive. And then the next paragraph said, firm is prohibited from marking the property publicly, including any of the methods listed in paragraph 10b above. If at a later date the property shall be marketed publicly, this agreement must be amended accordingly, and NCA Standard Form 710 may be used for such purpose. Do you guys understand what this is for?
Full and witness protection. I'm kidding. Celebrities or people who just don't want the general public knowing that their home is for sale, except you're just limited by, one-to-one person, word of mouth.
Right. And I will tell you that a lot of these independent or private firms that have been around for years and years and established clientele, for some of them, this is their way of doing business. I don't like it as a regular way of doing business because the MLS is our cooperative agreement, right? It helps us get it sold. So the better we can market a property, then I'm living up to the expectation that my client has for me. So I'm not going to talk somebody into an office exclusive. They have to come to me and present, this is why I don't want it on MLS. Does that make sense? And by the way, my understanding is if it's not on MLS, then you're not going to get that credit on the MLS. Now, I've been told, and Andrea, I don't know if you know this or not, but there have been some cases where an agent has gone to the MLS and they've given them credit for that sale, but I've never had that happen. Okay. All right. Lockbox and boxes, if you're going to put those on the property, check that box. And then there's a seller acknowledgement. This is what the seller must understand and how they should cooperate with you. They're giving you unauthorized use of a lock. I'm sorry. It says, seller acknowledges and understands that while the marketing services selected above will facilitate the showing and sale of the property, there are risks associated. And some of the risks could be unauthorized use of a lockbox. We can't control visitors during or after an open house, inappropriate use of information placed on the internet, things like that. So they understand there are some risks, but they're willing to take those and trust us that we're going to do the right thing to get their property sold. All right. Moving on to page 7, Earnest Money, number 11. Just remember, always check, our firm does not maintain a trust account. Okay. We don't hold money. We let the attorneys do that, or the buyer firm if usually. So I think most real estate companies understand now the liability with having your own trust account. And most real estate companies, the real estate companies that do have the trust accounts are usually the ones that do the property management, okay? Because you have to have a trust account for that. It's just easier for us to have our attorneys hold that. All right, just keep that in mind. Number 12 is your seller representations. This is what you need to know about the seller, how long they've owned the property. Also, in these other subsets, you need to ask them these questions. Are they under bankruptcy or about to be? Are they thinking about bankruptcy? Because this will impact and the sale of the property. Is it a manufactured home? If so, fill subset D out. And then subset E, a lot of agents forget this. If there's an owner's association, put the information in here. See, once you have the proper information here, all you have to do is copy and paste into the MLS, right? Okay, so you look for information one time and then you just copy paste. All right. And subset F says receipt of sample forms. It's customary and probably the right thing to do to give them the sample forms to look at so they're familiar with the forms they're going to be working with. And if you give them those, or if you check those boxes, make sure you give them those forms. We're moving on to page 8, flood hazard disclosure. Make sure you check a box, one or the other. Synthetic stucco. What should be here? If there's no synthetic stucco, there should be none or N/A. Subset I, termite bond. Is there a termite bond on the property? If you're like me, when I was a new agent, I was like, what in the heck is a termite bond? So if a seller has contracted with the termite company and they have a contract, say an annual contract to come out every quarter or twice a year to spray or treat for termites, then that is a termite bond. Sometimes they are transferable to a new buyer, sometimes they are not. So you need to look into that. All right, moving on. This is a huge one, subset J. Are there any current liens? What you need to know this, because if you don't do your proper research, you might be listing a house for nothing. You need to know their payoff, because let's just say that you can sell this house for $300,000, but their payoff is $310,000. They've already told you they don't have any money. All right, how are they going to pay the balance? Is this house marked? I mean, can you actually sell this house and do business with these clients? So anyway, some basic information, but the attorney's going to need this as well once this goes in escrow. And what they're going to need is you need just like it says, the lender name, the approximate balance, have them give you their monthly invoice or whatever, or look it up online, the lender's phone number and the lender's address. That's the pertinent information that you need. Now, if you know there's a second lien, you need to ask them, you need that information as well, or a third or whatever. All right, moving on down to subset K on leases. Is the property subject to a lease? So it may be an owner. Okay, so you may be selling a property owned by one person who is leasing it to another person. Or it could be a husband and wife that have a lease agreement for a family member who's living in the house. If it's being leased, you need to know and you need to disclose it. Subset I is FHA appraisal. Has an FHA appraisal been performed on the property within the last 4 months? Easy, easy. All right. And again, special assessments. If there are none, write none. What is a special assessment? Does someone want to unmute and tell us? What would be a special assessment assigned to the property?
Road repair coming up on their street, any special assessments for like something down the street, a new school, that type of thing.
Absolutely. Thanks, Karen. The very first house I bought, when we were closing, they told us, okay, there's a special assessment here. And I'm one of those, I'm like, my antenna goes up when you're talking about more money. I'm like, wait a minute, we paid X for this property. What do you mean? Well, this is how it works, Tommy. So the developer has not finished building out this community. So the tennis courts that are going to go in down here next month, once they get the bill for that, they're going to spread it out among all the households, and you're going to have to pay $600 or whatever. So if that's the case, you just need to know it. How do you know if there's a special assessment? Well, usually there's a letter sent by the HOA or the developer to each household, or you can call the HOA and ask them. All right, fuel tanks. Just disclose if there is any. If there is, where is it located? And then number 13 is seller duties, how they're to work with you, the expectations here. I'm not going to read through those. We'll move on to page 10. Home inspection. Seller is advised to obtain a home inspection for the purpose of evaluating the condition of the property in order to enhance its marketability and help reduce concerns of prospective buyers. Seller agrees or does not agree to obtain and pay for a home inspection. Most people don't get pre-home inspections, but we want to do the right thing and advise them, hey, I advise you to get a pre-inspection. They say no, okay, great, and just check no. Also, the checkbox here to the seller acknowledges receipt of a copy of questions and answers on home inspections. It's the right thing to give them that brochure, to download it, give it to them so they can read it and be knowledgeable about the process. All right, number 15 talks about photographs and other materials. Just good information to know and have read between you and your clients. Number 16, additional terms and conditions. Okay, I've used this in the past. I'm going to mention the example, and I always tell agents, don't reduce your commission, don't give up your commission. But I have a special program that I use. I've been doing for probably 12 of the 16 years I've been in business. And I have a program called Warrior Salute that I also opened up to the rest of the brokerage to use. But it's basically a packaged offering for anybody who served in uniform, school teachers included, medical personnel included. If they buy a house or sell a house with me, I will discount my commission by a certain amount. So this is where I put that information because it's a feel good for them. We've already talked about it and I discussed. Or if you've told your client, hey, I'm gonna give you a credit for your $500 home warranty after closing or upon closing, you can put that verbiage here. That's the only place we can add anything on this form. Okay. Now, if it's anything other than that kind of thing, you might want to talk to the BIC and make sure that you can actually put that in here. Okay. All right. Dual agency, not really going to spend time about dual agency, but I will tell you that you are allowed to do dual agency in this firm. If you're a full broker, if you're a PB, you need to talk to your BIC. So dual agency means I'm going to represent the seller and the buyer, which basically makes you a neutral party. And that's not good for either side. So dual agency, although we are allowed to do it and can do it, is not always the best option. So again, if you have questions about that, talk to your BIC. I can say, I think I lost one friendship over a dual agency. I've done plenty of them, but sometimes they just get very emotional. And that's why I say sometimes it's better to refer that side to another one of our agents and get a referral fee than try to do both sides. Okay, and this just is where the seller is going to authorize you to be dual agent or not. Number 18, mediation. Just read that and understand what that means. Again, at the bottom of all these pages, you're going to need to initial as the listing agent, and the seller will initial. Notice here, number 19 on page 12, there's a wire fraud warning. Okay. So this is again kind of a CYA for us, but also an educational piece for our sellers to let them know how we handle wire transfers or whatever. Okay, Page 13 is basically your signature page. Again, what boxes do we fill out here? So because I wanted to discuss this, what you see is the seller's full name, but what also must be filled out, I must have their signatures, the date of the signature, and at least their cell number and email number. So that way our office, our firm has the full information on these parties, and you're also going to transfer this information over to the attorney side and other parties as needed. So it's good to already have this as your, first agreement form. And then down at the bottom, whoops, let me just say, okay, if it was a company, LLC, they don't sign up at the top, they sign in the middle where it says entity seller. You put the entity name and then the party who is representing the entity and go from there. Down at the bottom is our information, our firm, Realty One Group Revolution, firm license number, phone number. Now, let me say this. If you're a PB, you got to put the, excuse me, the firm number here. If you're not a PB, you're a full broker, go ahead and put your phone number. Okay. Well, I don't want to field calls for your deals. Okay. I will if I have to, if I'm needed, but you're the one that they're going to copy this number and that's who they're going to call. What I would do if you're a PB, I would put the firm number and then I would put my number and then make a notation, your name beside it, so they know to call. Now you've complied by putting the firm's phone number, complied with North Carolina State Commission, but you've also given them your mobile number so they can contact you directly. And then you want to sign it, put your license number. Make sure for those of you who are dually licensed in North and South Carolina, make sure you look down at the bottom, you got a North Carolina firm, you put your North Carolina license number, don't flip it around. You have some issues there. And then put your again, here's a place for your agent phone number. Again, the phone number up top, I would make sure if you're a PB, they know that's the office number, and down at the bottom, they know that's your number. And then your email. And that is the standard form 101, which was revised July of this year. That's your listing agreement. Now we got about 4 minutes. Are there any questions?
How much of this do you like reasonably fill out prior to signatures, or do you, like, I would assume you put in the text box and stuff, but are there any things that you definitely wait to fill in by hand?
Okay, so 2 ways of doing business. It depends on who you are. Either you have a tablet and you're going to fill all this out electronically, or you're old school, you're going to take a clipboard and have these forms printed out. It doesn't matter. But if I've already had a conversation, look, by the time I get to having somebody sign one of these, I've already had conversation about the sale of the house and all that kind of stuff. So I have everything populated that I know I'm going to need, and I save it in my zip forms. And then if I have to have a second conversation to get the list price and all that, then I come back into zip forms, go back and add that information, save it, and then I send it over to them DigiSign to sign. Or I print it out. If it's a person who doesn't want to do digital signature, I print it out and I go hand deliver it and I get them to sign it. So either way, whatever's expedient for you. But I would say have some practice. It saves you time, because once you start getting busy in the business, you only want to do it one time, or you want to hire a transaction coordinator to do it for you. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.